The hushed silence is broken by the crack of a golf ball against the face of a golf club, and hundreds of spectators roar their approval as that little ball blasts down the fairway. Several in the crowd scream out to the golfer, "You're the man! You're the man!" The golfer bends down, picks up his tee, slyly acknowledges those who have cheered his shot, and he begins the trek down the fairway. Inside, he's pumped to the max. But it would be gauche to openly demonstrate it. After all, he's the man. The epitome of uber cool. Well, all of that may be well and good in the world of golf. Not so much when it comes to the assigning and accepting of responsibility. It seems to me as if nobody really wants to be the man. In light of all the recent events impacting not only our country, but that has spread worldwide, and the steps being taken to try and to correct those things, there has been a stumbling over one another in trying to ascribe blame, to lay the blame at somebody else's feet. And it really is so disheartening to watch as person after person tries to skirt responsibility, to accept the consequences for what they have done or that of others. This coming even after they have been confronted with their own words and actions. It's the epitome of hubris, of individuals who make statements in the past, and now they're brought up and they try to dissociate themselves with it. See, they're unwilling to accept responsibility. And against this backdrop, my mind started drifting back to David when he was king, and the confrontation that ensued between David and Nathan. You find the account recorded in the book of 2 Samuel, the 11th chapter, and it deals with the unsavoriness of the sin that David had with Bathsheba. But not only is the infidelity set forth, but the lengths that David went through to cover up the sin. Now, it ultimately led to the death of Uriah, who was Bathsheba's husband. In the 12th chapter of 2 Samuel, Nathan is sent by God to confront David about what he had done and how he had tried to cover it all up and everything in between. Now, as Nathan outlines the scenario, which was very akin to what David had done, David was brought to anger and railed against how could anyone do such a despicable deed. Now see, what was going on is David was unwilling to see himself for who he had become. So Nathan got a little bit more to the point. He looked David square in the eye, we can only assume, and with the sternness of a voice unwavering, said, "You are the man. You are the man." Oh, not like the man that hit the golf ball down and the shout of joy and exultation. No, this was more sober. You are the man. But to put it in the parlance of today, Nathan told David, who was the king, David, you need to man up. You need to accept responsibility. You need to step forward. You need to man up. Accept that responsibility and do the things necessary to improve the situation and then move forward better in the future than has been the case seen in the past. Which, when David was confronted with this, is exactly what he did. If you notice in 2 Samuel, the 12th chapter and verse 3, David finally came to the conclusion, I have sinned against the Lord. I acknowledge it. I've been wrong. I have sinned. Now, sadly, it seems that most people have extreme difficulty about manning up. They spend a considerable amount of time trying to affix blame and sliding out from under the problem that they do in trying to eradicate themselves from it. In fact, a lot of times, they do more trying to slide away from it than it would take to correct the situation. Now, it's easy to see in others, but it is the rare person who sees it in self without the prodding from others. So while it provides the impetus for conversation to talk about the failings of politicians and others, and they're easy to poke fun at, what we need to do is to take a look to ourselves. Examine self. A fact that is borne out in the teaching of Jesus, as is seen in Matthew, the 7th chapter, the first 5 verses. So just as we desire our leaders and others to accept responsibility, shouldn't we have the same desire for self as relates to, well, for one, our spiritual well-being, and then that on the impact of others? We should truly do that. Paul would write to the Corinthians in the 10th chapter of the first letter, verse 12. Therefore, to him who thinks he stand, take heed lest he fall. And I'm sure we can all agree that our elected officials need to be held accountable for their actions and their decisions. Some good, some not so good. But we need to learn from this example that we as well will be held accountable, though not necessarily to man, more importantly, to the God of heaven. In 2 Corinthians, the 5th chapter, and verse 10, Paul notes, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body, according to what he has done, whether good or bad." That same sentimentality is brought out in the 12th chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes, verses 13 and 14. So in light of this fact, would you say that you have manned up in regards to your life?